Welcome to KBS World Radio. You're now tuned in to Korea24's Korea Book Club, where we explore the world of Korean literature. This is our weekend replay edition, playing back our book segment from Wednesday's show. We hope you enjoy it. I'm your host, Kwon Jang-woo. Joining me now in the studio is Barry Welsh, our literary critic, with another work for us to discover. Barry, hello, it's good to see you.
Yes, hello, Jang-ho.
Okay, so what do you have in store for us today?
So this week we're reviewing a dystopian novel called Saha. The Korean title is Saha-mention by Cho Nam-joo and translated by Jamie Chang. And Saha is Cho's second novel to be translated into English following the runaway success of her previous book, Kim Ji-young, born 1982. That novel was published in Korea in 2016 when it almost immediately became a bestseller for tapping into Korea's Me Too movement and the feminist movement, and it explored the effects that Korean patriarchal society has on a young woman of the title. And it would eventually sell over 1 million copies, probably sold quite significantly more than that at this point. And it was translated into English, again by Jamie Chang, and published in English in 2020. It was also translated into several other languages. It was adapted into a hit film. And as such, this follow-up novel, Saha, was very eagerly anticipated when it was published in Korean in 2019, and then when its English translation followed last year, 2022. And Saha explores themes similar to Cho's previous novel, but also expands on them. So this is a story about the damaging effects of capitalism on the individual and a dystopian critique of inequality and class repression. It's a novel that very much echoes other works published by Korean writers in recent years, so you might detect some hints of The Disaster Tourist or even Park Min-gyu's short story Roadkill, which we talked about recently. And Saha is, I think, a worthy addition to this small genre of dystopian Korean novels critiquing capitalism, and it's a novel that I'm sure many readers will enjoy discussing.
Right, so as you said, the author is Cho Nam-joo, the author of the acclaimed work Kim Ji-young, born in 1982, but it sounds like today's work, Saha, is something quite different. Mm-hmm. While Kim Ji-young was more of a sort of a social realist drama focusing on everyday life and the mundanity of everyday sort of sexism and patriarchal society. This has a sci-fi dystopian setting, you're saying then, right? Which is also quite interesting because it's a growing trend among Korean writers, right? We've covered several stories and novels in recent months that use these sorts of near-future settings, and they are used to critique inequalities in modern society today. So, yeah, I'd be very curious to see how Cho tackles this setting. Barry, how does Cho introduce readers to these issues in Saha?
So you are correct. This is still a social commentary novel, but it does have a different sort of focus. The way the novel begins, it actually sets up a murder mystery, and readers might expect that sort of central murder mystery to be followed more closely than it actually is. So a young man wakes up in a car beside his girlfriend. His girlfriend is dead. The man's memories are foggy. He can't really remember what happened, and because he's from this sort of very low class background, he's scared of the police, he flees the scene of the crime. And this young man is Do-kyung, and he's a resident of the Saha estates. And Cho uses this murder mystery setup as a hook to introduce us to the residents of the Saha estates. And while this murder mystery element is woven into the story, it really isn't Cho's primary focus. So instead, what she's interested in is telling us about this, dilapidated apartment block on the fringes of town. And town is the name for a wealthy mega city that essentially acts as its own country, but it's a country that's run by a corporation and it's controlled by anonymous bureaucrats and politicians and councillors.
Right, and it's simply known as town.
As town,
okay.
Yes, as town. And the residents of town comprise two types of of people, well, three types of people. You have the wealthy L1s, who are the permanent residents of town, and then we have the L2s, and they're allowed to live and work in the city based on a visa system. And then we have this sort of third underclass of people, and this is the Saha residents who don't qualify for visas, and they're instead sort of forced to live in squalor and often exploited for their labour in the kind of difficult or dangerous or unpleasant jobs that the L1s and L2s don't want to do. And Cho's novel jumps from these different character to character to describe the lives of the residents in the Saha estates. And so we hear their stories of repression and exploitation. And Cho asks us, is it possible for people who've been disenfranchised like this to make any kind of a stand against these sort of faceless bureaucrats and this ultra corporatized government that controls everything around them?
Right, so I think we can already start to draw parallels with the current modern-day society there. But I think many listeners will also be familiar with this type of dystopian narrative and everything from George Orwell's 1984 to The Hunger Games and Korean dramas such as Squid Game, and also Netflix's new K-drama Black Knight. But does Cho bring anything new to the table in Saha?
Right, so there certainly are familiar elements in Cho's novel, and it might not weave those elements into something entirely original, but nevertheless, I think it is a powerful work with lots of elements, lots of strands that are thought-provoking. One of the novel's strong points is in showing the constrained lives of the Saha residents, how their opportunities for everything, their relationships, their work, their family, even giving birth and just existing, are sort of entirely set by this wealthy group of people who are just indifferent to their lives and to their suffering. And in fact, the wealthy residents of town, they need this group of impoverished and exploited people to keep their society functioning the way they want it to. And that dynamic is portrayed very well in the novel.
What was also quite chilling was that the Korean version of Saha was published in 2019 before the outbreak of COVID-19. And that's important because the novel actually has a plot about a fictional pandemic and the government's response to it, right?
Right, yeah. So, that is an interesting aspect of the book. I was very surprised that this book predated COVID because that section of the novel clearly mirrors things that happened in various parts of the world in response to COVID-19. So the way the virus spreads, the government reaction, the lockdowns, the burden on the medical professionals, it's actually uncanny how much it mirrors what transpired in the years after the novel was actually published. And I think it just shows that there was some awareness that something like this was possible. There were other works of fiction before COVID which explored similar things, but shows, gets right how it did unfold, and that it was probable something like that would happen. Again, that isn't the main focus of the novel, but it is an example of how insightful Cho can be.
Right, so there is that extra fascinating layer to this novel as well then. We'll leave it there, Barry. Thank you for that, and we'll see you again next week. Take care.
Okay, take care.
KBS World Radio.